At the end of World War I, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania seized a rare opportunity, declaring independence as empires like Russia and Germany collapsed. For the first time in centuries, they could shape their own destinies, speak their languages, and celebrate their cultures openly. National identity flourished in art, literature, and music, and the 1920s and 30s saw these nations build modern states from scratch. Constitutions were written, parliaments established, and economies developed. Cities like Tallinn, Riga, and Vilnius became vibrant capitals. Optimism was everywhere. People believed they were building a lasting, unique future, but independence was always fragile. The Baltic states were small, surrounded by powerful neighbors, and had to navigate a dangerous political landscape. They joined the League of Nations, hoping for protection, and worked tirelessly to prove themselves as sovereign nations. Yet the memory of foreign rule lingered, and the threat of losing freedom was never far away. Their independence was a bright but vulnerable flame, cherished and celebrated, but always under threat. Monuments were built, national holidays celebrated with passion, and every moment of freedom was treasured. This brief period became fundamental to their identity, a golden age that would inspire future generations. The Baltic peoples knew their freedom was precious and could be lost in an instant. Their determination to preserve it would echo through the darkest times ahead. In the 1930s, the Baltic states faced a dire reality, squeezed between the Soviet Union to the east and Nazi Germany to the west. Their strategic location made them a tempting prize for both powers, each with historical claims and ambitions. Stalin saw the Baltics as lost Russian territory. Hitler eyed them as part of his eastern expansion. The Baltic leaders tried to remain neutral, signing non-aggression pacts and forming the Baltic Entente, but their alliance lacked real power. Their diplomatic efforts were desperate, but, ultimately, neutrality was a policy born of weakness. As Hitler and Stalin grew bolder, the international system meant to protect small nations crumbled. The League of Nations was powerless, and Western powers were distracted by their own crises. The Baltic states realized with growing dread that they were alone. Their fate would be decided not in their capitals, but in Berlin and Moscow. They were pawns in a game played by giants. In August 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union shocked the world by signing a non-aggression pact. Publicly, it was a promise not to attack each other. Secretly, it was a plan to carve up Eastern Europe. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact included a hidden protocol dividing the region into spheres of influence. Estonia and Latvia were assigned to the Soviets, Lithuania to Germany, later shifted to the Soviet side. Poland was to be partitioned between them. For the Baltic states, this secret deal sealed their fate without their knowledge or consent. Hitler invaded Poland from the west, Stalin invaded from the east. The pact's secret terms were put into action, and the Baltics were now marked as Soviet territory. Their hopes for neutrality were shattered by a handshake in Moscow. The Baltic states were trapped, with no allies and no escape. Their independence was now a bargaining chip between dictators. The countdown to occupation had begun. With the world distracted by war, Stalin moved to tighten his grip on the Baltics. He used intimidation, not invasion, accusing the Baltic governments of hostility and demanding mutual assistance pacts. These pacts allowed the Soviets to station troops and build bases inside Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The Red Army massed on their borders, making the threat unmistakable. The Baltic leaders tried to negotiate, but the Soviets were inflexible, sign or face invasion. Faced with overwhelming force, all three governments signed. By late 1939, tens of thousands of Soviet soldiers were stationed across the Baltics. Officially, the governments remained in charge, but real power now rested with Moscow. The Soviets promised not to interfere, but everyone knew it was a lie. This was only the first stage. Stalin was waiting for the right moment to complete his takeover. The Baltics' independence was now a facade, soon to be swept away. The decision not to fight the Soviets was shaped by brutal military reality. The combined Baltic armies numbered less than 75,000. The Soviets had over 435,000 troops, thousands of tanks, and overwhelming air power. The Baltics had few tanks, outdated planes, and little hope of resisting a mechanized invasion. Their flat geography offered no natural defenses, perfect for a Soviet blitz. Soviet troops already inside their borders could strike from within, crippling any defense before it began. For Baltic leaders, resistance meant certain annihilation. Cities bombed, civilians slaughtered, armies destroyed. Fighting would have been suicide, not heroism. The only realistic choice was to avoid a bloodbath and hope to preserve their people. The military imbalance was absolute. Resistance was futile. The Baltics faced a Goliath with no slingshot in sight. Their leaders chose survival over doomed defiance. It was a tragic, pragmatic decision forced by overwhelming odds. In June 1940, as France fell to the Nazis, Stalin issued final ultimatums to the Baltic states. The demands allow unlimited Soviet troops and form pro-Soviet governments immediately. The Baltic leaders faced an impossible choice: resist and face destruction, or surrender and lose independence. Military resistance would have meant thousands dead, cities in ruins, and no hope of victory. Surrender was heartbreaking, but it would spare their people from immediate slaughter. After agonizing debate, all three governments chose non-resistance. Lithuania's president fled. In Estonia and Latvia, leaders decided a bloodbath must be avoided. Surrender was not cowardice but a desperate act to save lives. They hoped, perhaps in vain, that survival would allow their nations to endure until the world changed. The Baltics' independence was extinguished in a matter of days. Their leaders sacrificed freedom for the hope of future survival. The world barely noticed as three nations disappeared overnight. The dream of independence was buried but not forgotten. The Baltic states' final tragedy was their utter isolation. In 1940, Europe was consumed by Nazi blitzkrieg. France had fallen, Britain was fighting for survival. The idea of confronting the Soviets was unthinkable for the West. Britain offered only words. The US remained neutral and focused elsewhere. Finland was exhausted from its own war with the Soviets. Sweden clung to neutrality. Poland had already been conquered. There was no one left to help. The League of Nations, created to protect small nations, was powerless and irrelevant. The Baltic states were surrounded, abandoned, and overshadowed by global catastrophe. Their appeals for help went unanswered. Their fate became a forgotten footnote in the chaos of 1940. The world looked away as the Baltics vanished from the map. After the ultimatums, Soviet occupation began in earnest. Red Army troops flooded in, disarming local forces and seizing control. Soviet officials dismantled the governments, installing puppet regimes loyal to Moscow. Sham elections were held, with only communist-backed candidates allowed. The results were a farce: overwhelming support for Soviet rule. The new parliaments requested admission to the u.s.s.r. Moscow quickly obliged. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania were erased as independent nations. The Soviet regime moved swiftly, property was seized, farms collectivized, and society forcibly remade. The NKVD unleashed terror, arresting and deporting thousands. In June 1941, over 40,000 people were sent to Siberian gulags in a single week. The goal: destroy Baltic society and eliminate its leaders. The dream of independence was crushed under the weight of Soviet repression. The story of Baltic resistance didn't end with surrender. Many refused to accept Soviet rule, especially after mass deportations in 1941. When Nazi Germany invaded, some hoped for liberation, but soon realized one tyranny had replaced another. After the Red Army returned in 1944, true resistance began. Thousands became forest brothers, waging guerrilla war from the woods. They attacked Soviet convoys, sabotaged collectivization, and kept hope alive for nearly a decade. Isolated and outnumbered, they received no Western help. The Soviets responded with brutal force, eventually crushing the insurgency. Yet, the memory of the Forest Brothers endured, inspiring future generations. The spirit of independence survived in secret songs, stories, and traditions. The decision to surrender in 1940 saved lives, but the longing for freedom never died. When the Soviet Union weakened in the late 1980s, the Baltic peoples rose again. The Singing Revolution restored their independence in 1991, finally fulfilling the dream so long denied.